Should cities and counties require design plans or engineering plans or architectural plans, call them design plans, should they require design plans as part of a land subdivision approval? My answer is usually not. I would give you a firm no. There are some circumstances where it might be reasonable to do that. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video, but usually it's a bad idea to require a full set of design plans when you're trying to get a land subdivision approved. So why? Why is it a bad idea? So I'm going to give you, I'll give you 3 reasons why it's a bad idea to do that. Number 1, you can create legal lots that are not necessarily buildable. We see that fairly frequently, right? So, for example, you might want to do an agricultural subdivision, and you're taking a 160-acre farm and you're splitting it up into 4 40-acre farms, and you may not need to build anything to do that. You're just trying to segregate your ownership. Or you could be creating, recreational parcels. Maybe you own some riparian woodland, and right now you got one 80-acre parcel, and you want to create 10 80-acre parcels, and you're gonna sell those to hunters and fishermen, and nothing's gonna be built. Maybe a boat dock or a blind, hunter's blind, but nothing serious. So, one of the challenges I deal with is I frequently work with public agencies that assume that just because you're doing a land subdivision, you're going to build something. That's not always true. And there's nothing in the law that says you're required to build something if you want to do a land subdivision. So that's the first reason. I think landowners should be able to create legal lots. They don't necessarily have to be buildable lots. There's nothing in the law that says when you create a lot, it has to be buildable. Now, there could be some local ordinances that come into play there, but as a general rule, I think people confuse the two. They just automatically assume if you're going to have a new lot, you have to be able to put a house on it, or a gas station, or an office building. Not true. The second reason is that subdivisions are useful for things other than construction. I alluded to that a little bit in the previous point. So for example, a lot of times you want to create separate parcels for financing purposes. So let's go back to the example where you own a 160-acre farm. If you take a loan out on that 160-acre farm and then you default, even if it's a small loan that's only worth a fraction of what the parcel is worth, the bank's going to come and foreclose on the whole 160-acre farm. So you may want to split that, if you can, into 440s, and then you can only use as collateral those parcels that you need to justify the value of the loan. So if it's a small loan, you may only need to encumber one of the 40-acre parcels instead of the whole 160. So that is another reason. Financing is another reason. It's not just always construction and development. There are could be tax purposes. There's all kinds of reasons. Some weird oddities in the zoning code. There's different reasons why you might want to create a subdivision besides that you're just trying to build something. And then the third reason is there are incentives in California, because of the way we regulate land, to subdivide now and build later. and the basic incentive is there's no guaranteed right to subdivide in California. The local agency can basically change the zoning of your parcel at any time. So in many cases, it's a smart thing to subdivide while you can, even if you don't have intentions to immediately build. I'll try and give you a quick example that explains that. So I own a 20-acre parcel on the edge of town. It's currently zoned for 5-acre minimum lots. So I could take my 20-acre parcel and I could split it into 4 5s with the regular subdivision. But at any point in time, the city could come in and decide that they're going to rezone that to 20-acre open space, and now I can no longer subdivide. If I go ahead and do the subdivision while I have the zoning, even if they change the zoning later, they can't take those 5 parcels away, right? I still have those legal lots. I may not be able to build on them necessarily, but there's other things I can do with them. So sometimes it makes sense to subdivide even if you don't have immediate plans to build. There could be a lot of other reasons why you don't immediately want to build. Maybe you're waiting for an investment to pay off, or your kid's 8 years old and you want to teach them how to be a real estate developer after they get out of college. It doesn't matter. The reality is there are times when the landowner wants to subdivide but they don't want to build anything. Okay, so I've given you that general rule, but I mentioned in the beginning of the video, hey, sometimes it really does make sense for the local agency to require a full set of design plans with the subdivision approval. So what are those exceptions? I've got 3 exceptions here. I think number 1, when it's clearly the intent of the subdivider to build single-family homes, multiple single-family homes. So if somebody's coming in to do a 300-lot subdivision, 0.1 acre lots for single-family homes, yeah, it probably makes sense to have some design plans with that for the roads, the utilities, all that other stuff. But I think, most of the subdivisions we deal with are not that type of subdivision. The other situation when it may make sense is when the infrastructure that's going to be designed at some point as part of the improvement of the lots is really going to dictate the lot design. Then it may make sense to get some design plans as part of the subdivision approval process. So, if you've got some wicked terrain or you've got flooding issues and you have to go in and build some infrastructure, levees, roads, retaining walls, bridges, then it makes sense to do those processes in parallel, right? The land subdivision process and the design process, because the infrastructure needs on that site are gonna dictate the lot layout and the layout of easements. And then finally, if you're gonna go to construction right after the subdivision anyways, if the client's gonna do that, then it makes sense for the client to just run those processes simultaneously, the land subdivision and the design plans. And a lot of developers will do that. They're going to go subdivide. They plan to build right after. That's why they're subdividing. And so in that situation, it's really not an extra burden to require the design plans. In fact, it actually developers prefer that because they want to keep that schedule moving forward. So what are some alternatives to requiring a full set of design plans if somebody comes in to do a land subdivision, if you're a public agency? So first of all, I want to mention that you typically still have to provide some kind of information about proposed use of the land and proposed improvements as part of the tentative map process, right? So I'm not saying that you can't ask people for some concepts. What I'm saying is, when you as a public agency go in and require a full set of design plans at the tentative map stage, you're really forcing the developer to spend a lot of money up front on those design costs that he or she may not need to spend. And so, as an example, I was working on a subdivision in Sunnyvale in the Bay Area. This was a tech company, small tech company that owned some space there. They had some research space and office space, but they had a large chunk of the lot, probably the back 60% of the lot, was unoccupied and wasn't being used, and so they wanted to subdivide it. And because they wanted to sell that back lot, they wanted to sell it and use that money to reinvest in their company. And the folks over there at the city just had a real hard time with that. They kept asking us to bring them a full set of design plans, and we kept telling them, we're just going to divide this lot for sale. We don't know what the new owner is going to build on it. Like, you've got the zoning there, right? Like, they can only build what it's zoned for. Like, what? Yeah, we could give you office plans for a hotel, but maybe the new buyer wants to build an office park, right? And those designs are going to be completely different. So sometimes I work with folks, at the planning or building department that really struggle with this idea of, hey, we can create a lot for sale that doesn't, without necessarily having a plan to build on it. So what are some alternatives? We talked about one. You can process in parallel. So you can have the subdivision approval process running in parallel with the process to approve the design plans. That, like I said, in many situations that's actually good for the developer and it makes a lot of sense. I still think those processes should be firewalled to some extent. So the approval of one set of documents shouldn't depend on what happens with the other set of documents. Those processes should be separate, and I think in California, the developer has a legal right to pursue a subdivision in many circumstances without a full set of design plan. The other thing I tell cities a lot is, cities and counties is, you first of all, you've got the restrictions in the zoning already. So just because I create a parcel doesn't mean I can ignore the zoning. I can't. And secondly, you've got the building permit hammer, right? So you're going to be able to go in at the building permit level, and you're going to be able to condition things and condition that building permit and require things at the building permit level. Now there may be some legal limits on what you can do there depending on how your local ordinances are set up, but that's really where the requirement for a full set of design plans should be. It should be at the building permit level. It should not be at the subdivision level. And I think a lot of times we're putting the requirement for a full set of design plans way too early in the process. And it's just an extra burden. It's one of the reasons why things are hard to build in California. And it ignores all those other reasons why somebody might want to subdivide. So run the processes in parallel. If you have to, put the conditions on the building permit, not on the subdivision approval. Let people subdivide their land when they have a legal right. Don't make them waste money on a full set of design plans if they're just not at that stage in their project.